A question asked courageously, answered honestly, and lived authentically can change your whole life. For me, that question was, how can I use what I have, what I love, and what I know to bless the lives of others? The School for Good Living and this podcast are one answer to that question. Hi, I'm Brian Miller. I know that the world can work for everyone, but that it won't until it works for you. I've created this to help you make the difference you were born to make. It's a series of conversations with thought leaders who are moving humanity forward. And in each episode, I explore their lives and the work they do. I also ask them to break down how they've gotten their books written, published, and read. This podcast is all about exploring the magic and mystery, and sometimes the misery, of the creative process. So if you have a mission, a message, and the motivation to share it, this podcast is for you. Welcome to the School for Good Living. Hello, my friends. Today, my guest is Sophie Chiche, founder of Shape House, an urban sweat lodge, and author of The Power of Personal Accountability, Achieve What Matters to You. Sophie is working on a new book that will maybe be out by the time you hear this. In the interview, she won't tell me the title. It's still a working title, evidently. At any rate, Sophie has degrees in business, psychology, and journalism. She has given a couple of TED Talks, one called Learning Curves, one called Happy Parents of Children Who Live Out Loud. In this interview, we explore the fact that Sophie used to weigh more than 350 pounds, but she's lost and kept off more than half that weight. I asked her to share with me the mindset and behavior that allowed her to achieve such a massive transformation, knowing that pretty much every one of us has at least one area of our lives in which we want to make a similarly significant change. We explore emotions, learning how to love ourselves, and the power of integrity to transform our lives. Sophie shares this idea, very powerful, that we are in charge of our lives right now, and it's not a rehearsal. We also talk about forgiveness and a shift in perspective that Sophie has used to improve the quality of every one of her relationships. She also shares with me a question that she asks herself consistently to make good decisions. We, of course, explore Shape House, this urban sweat lodge, and what it's like to be inside an infrared sauna, what it is, why somebody would want to. Hint, it feels good, it clears your mind, it deepens your sleep, it helps you feel light, which explains why Sophie has 8 locations now between California and New York. I asked Sophie to share the story of how and why she started this business and how she persisted to make it a significant success even when the people around her didn't understand it or think it would be successful. It's with that I am very pleased to introduce to you my new friend, Sophie Chiche. Sophie, welcome to the School for Good Living.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sophie, what's life about?
Service, laughing, playing, growing, learning, sharing, contributing, expanding. I love the idea that I finish every day with knowing more and loving more than I did the day before. So by the end of life, I should be pretty set.
Sounds good to me. With a response like that, that's how I know we're going to be great friends.
Exactly. That's when you started by saying I'm interested in, service. It was like, all right, well, service is my motto and has been since I was very young. So, yeah.
I understand you have a background, your education. Of course, there's the academic portion, then there's the real life portion. You have degrees in journalism, in business, in psychology. Mm-hmm. You've been an author. You've written a second book that you're about to publish. I want to ask you about that. But I want to start with something you talk about in a TED Talk that you gave, which was the fact that you used to weigh more than 300 pounds.
Mm-hmm. 350, actually. Mm-hmm.
That is unbelievable. And you've lost more than half that weight, and you've kept it off.
Yes.
Tell me, what happened? Like, how did you do that? What was that about? What was life like at that weight? What's it like now?
Thank you for asking that. I didn't think we'd go there. It's almost like having two lives. Think of it that way. Like you would wake up tomorrow and you're an old Asian lady. It would be like, what life is that from having been what
that
you
would be pretty wild for me, especially.
Exactly. So my point is, in this particular culture, to be 350 pounds versus, 160 that I'm now, it literally is like a different, like waking up it didn't happen overnight, obviously, but the experience of what I live now versus what I lived then is like having a different life entirely. In the way, the buying of clothes, the sitting on planes, the dating, the knowing who I am, the being perceived by others one way versus another. Everything that you relate to the world in a one way, I relate it to the world in two different ways very much. So that's one answer. There's so much we can talk about.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued when you say knowing who I am, because clearly there's an identity associated with both of those. And part of what intrigues me so much about this as well is that, there's the external observable aspect of this. And in your case, it was very physical. It was very
observable.
Very observable. But I think we all have these kinds of things in our lives. There's a spiritual or emotional equivalent of being 350 pounds. And we want to be different. We want to live that other identity that is also inside us. But we don't, I think in many cases, know how, or we know how, but we're afraid. And so beyond even the weight loss itself, what I'm really interested to know, and I suspect people listening would want to know, is how did you make such a massive change? What do you say to others who want to do the same thing in some area of their life?
I love that you're starting there too, because I remember being 18, 19, young. I wasn't 350 then, I gained more after, but I was already like in the 250, which, by the way, I'm from Paris, which I don't know if you've ever been, but 350 pounds in Paris is like 700, somewhere else, because people are so thin and so obsessed with thinness. And so it was even more.
Which is amazing to me that there aren't more 300 pounders, because the bakeries really are so delightful.
They eat less, and they eat slower, and they eat with pleasure, and they eat with like more, it's like it's an experience to eat in France. When here, people down their food in their car at the, it's not an experience that's remotely enjoyed and taken the time for. And I think that plays a huge part. And they eat fat. And for the longest time, America didn't eat fat. And now it's back, with the work that Dave Asprey has been doing with Bulletproof, which I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yes.
So one of the things that struck me when you're asking is remembering being, like I said, 18, 19, and I went to therapy, and my therapist said something that really literally changed the course of my life around all this. Is she spoke to the notion that I was actually honest, that my weight showed, and maybe another one is an alcoholic, or another one is a work alcoholic, or another one is, angry at everybody, or another one lives a really miserable life inside, or whatever it is, mine was showing. And there was something very admirable, and the way she said it to me just somehow shifted the relationship I had with myself, because she was right. And I am a very honest person, and I'm not going to, mind you, I smoke 3 packs a day when I was a smoker. So I tend to do things.
You go for it.
So I'm glad you're asking, because I think I'm a good person to discuss, how do you change things? Because they were pretty dramatic and pretty far from the norm, and far from the center, at least, of health or healthy habits. So one of the layers that interests me in the work that I did was to look at it as a physical, emotional, mental, and to some degree spiritual process. And so one of the things that was occurring as I was losing the weight was I could see that if I solved something physically, so if I say lost 20 pounds, but I didn't adjust my emotional and almost like think of it as like these bars, right? It's like the first bar, the physical's done, and then the mental would have to catch up, and the emotional and the spiritual, like all of that had to come to a certain similar maturity, because otherwise, right? Like I would just go back to the start. And so I saw very quickly that it was a holistic approach, and you could not do, like, people are like, well, what do you eat? And I'm like, well, that's 10% of the problem or the situation, And so to look at it holistically was probably one of the gifts that I was able to see that very, very quickly. And I would think that's true for everything. So if there's a job you don't love, you can look at it holistically. Like, what does it give you? What does it doesn't give you? And who can you talk to that could help that piece or this piece? Like, I don't think we can solve ourselves. Like, there really is, in praise of coaches and healers and anyone out there that's, doing something to move people's needles. I don't go to the dentist saying that I can fix my own teeth.
Right.
I don't operate on my own heart. It's like some people have done that and they've studied something, and for some reason we don't look at psychology or mental construct the same way, and it should be looked at the same way. And I'm not saying go to therapy, everybody. But I'm saying do something that sheds light and helps you from the outside to look at what you do and can say, hey, have you, you're walking on your head. Have you ever tried walking on your feet?
Yeah.
So a version of that.
So one of the stories that I heard was this experience about one night you pulled a chair up to the refrigerator.
Where did you hear that story?
Will you tell me about that?
So yes, I kind of attribute it to the beginning of the end, or the end of the beginning, whatever we want to call it, but definitely a before and after moment where I went to my refrigerator, which I would do a lot at 2-3 o'clock in the morning. I would wake up and I would feel feelings and not know what to do with them. And I would just go to the refrigerator and eat my heart out because that's all I knew to do. And one day, the day after, I did one of the worst ones where I ate everything in sight and really made myself quite sick. And yet the next day I was doing it again at 2 o'clock in the morning. And I said to myself in a really sweet, I still don't know exactly where those voices come from. You've done a lot of work, it's like there's an intuition, there's a younger part of us, there's something in there that speaks. And it said, you can eat everything you want, but before we do that, can we feel our feelings? And I was startled basically and said, okay, all right, I'll try. And then I backed off from the refrigerator where I was about to, orgy on everything that was there, and did that. And it was probably one of the most difficult thing I've ever done and the most liberating without a question, because I felt my sadness, I felt my loneliness, I felt the despair of being human. It's difficult to be a human and it's complicated. And I was raised in an environment that treated feelings as the plague to be avoided at all costs. There was actually a sweet story that tags along with this one where my daughter, years later, was 10, and we went to my parents' house. They have a house in the Alps in France, and we skied. And on that day, my daughter fell, and she hurt, she banged in something, and her lip hurt, whatever. The lip was really hurting. And we came back to the house, and for the next 3-4 hours, I witnessed the dance. My mother would say, don't cry. Do you want some Nutella? And my daughter was like, no, I'm just in pain. I just want to feel my pain. And my father would come, to the rescue and say, would you like some ice cream? Like, it was all about do not feel what you're feeling and put sugar on top of it, to numb what's going on right now. And when I saw that, I just was really pulled back to all these moments of my life where obviously I would have, the way they were doing it with her was the way they were doing it with me. And mind you, that's how they were doing it for themselves. It wasn't an attack on like, we're going to destroy our daughter, Never. Parents never, when some maybe psychopaths, but mostly our parents don't get up in the morning thinking, oh, I'm going to do something to hurt my kid. They're really trying their best and they're doing what they can. And in this case, sugar instead of feeling was definitely the operating manual at the house.
Yeah, it's often so much easier to do something other than feel, right? And this experience where something inside you, some voice that night in front of the refrigerator told you, look, go ahead, but can you feel your feelings?
Exactly. And there's also a concept for me that's very moving when I started doing that being feel my feelings, is that they're not as big as we think. They're not as scary. I mean, I know for me, I don't know for everybody and for you, but I think part of what happens is we think they're going to be so big. There's a sweet moment in a movie. Did you ever see Mulan, the Disney movie?
Sure.
There's a scene where she becomes the guy, right? So she can go to war. And then Mushu, this little dragon, little guy, and he uses, fire and sounds and like this really scary thing, to scare her, and she kind of walks towards the rock where the thing is coming from, and all she sees is this little salamander making all this noise, and when I saw that the first time, I had this realization that feelings are a little bit like that. Like we imagine them as like these big things that are going to swallow us, and our anger is going to take over, and we're going to like destroy the world, like Hulk and whatever. But it's not because now that I'm caught up. When it started, it was a little bit overwhelming. I will say that, especially because I was not used to feeling what was happening. Like sadness is a very particular color of experiences inside of ourselves. Now, it's probably going to happen in this call. It's like I'll sit here and I'll just like cry for a second. And it's like when you do it without without stopping it, without, preventing it. It's actually a generous, beautiful, relaxing, short, actually, for the most part, experience. And it's beautiful. And I do not know why we've developed such a barrage, to not feel them. So I'm kind of I didn't realize until this moment, but I think I'm going to become a bit of a crusade for, feel your feelings.
Well, I wondered if that was a part of why you studied psychology. And I know this saying, and I happen to think it's true, that we teach what we need to learn, and we're our own worst students, right? But tell me a little bit about from that moment, why you took the path you did academically, and how this is a big question then, and how that's led you to where you are now. I know that covers more than 10 years.
Well, but okay.
Yeah.
So I actually come from an interesting culture where education was important, as a girl, not as important as a guy, like I'm 50 and 30 years ago, women were kind of trained to think that staying home was kind of the deal, right? So I was a little bit discouraged, but also encouraged because smart people, go to school and learn and stuff. But I hated school with such a passion.
Why?
I was such a misfit. And because I think education is one particular way to learn. And some kids it fits really well, and some kids it really doesn't. And I think I was too creative, learning things by heart is the least interesting thing for me in the world. And to have me sit down in 2 hours of geography, swallowing data, was like pain. It was like it would be pain today. It's painful to not learn the way. I'm a learner that loves a conversation. You're passionate about geography, you tell me all about it. I can sit there for 3 hours, but to study some dry fact that I'm never going to use, particularly now, by the way, when we have our phones.
Yeah.
We used to have to go, to the library to get some data. It's now we talk to the phone, and the phone tells us before we even can think of the question. And education is not changing. It's we're not adapting. It hasn't changed in 100 years, and everything else. I mean, as you know, the world has become like my Asian woman for you tomorrow morning. It's the world is the black and white. It's the opposite of what it was, and it's complete, opposite version of itself. And I believe that the education today might be really good for some kids that are kind of particularly, geared to learn a certain way. I mean, there's all this research I'm sure you're familiar with multiple intelligence, and we don't learn the same way. Some kids cannot learn while they're sitting down. They have to move. And it's now we have all these kids with ADD. It's they may not have ADD. They just need to get up once in a while. And I feel we are not. So my particular journey, sorry, I'm back. My particular journey was that I hated school because mostly I hated learning things that were not of interest to me. But as I became more of an adult and I became more interested in topics, I wanted to learn more. So it wasn't an education for me. It was more I want to write. I want to be a journalist. And it's well, great. There's a school that teaches you how to, at least the basics of that. And probably the best of my writing did not come from that school, but we'll never know because I did go to the school. And so there's always that thing of did you become the result of what you've done, or would you have done it anyway? Or, there's this whole big question of destiny, of course, and where we all come from and where we all going, which might be big for right now. But to answer your question, I think when I discovered what I was interested in, I loved going to school and I loved learning and I loved meeting people that were like-minded and exploring topics. And so I took on whatever interested me. So I was interested in psychology because I actually picked a school that was very experiential. I wasn't sure I was going to practice. I actually didn't practice very much because I wasn't that interested in one-on-one sitting with people. I became a coach because I was more interested in where people are now. I feel whatever is not resolved from my past is here anyway. I don't really need to go. I don't need to know what happened when you were 5. You're doing it with your boss today.
Yeah. That by the way, I think if more people got that, and even the way you said that about whatever is in your past, whatever's not resolved, whatever's, it's all here in the present anyway.
It's all here right now. There's really no need to. I love people that go to therapy, and it's often very good work, and I'm not questioning that, but I'm saying there's a shortcut to me where it's you're in a relationship with someone, treats you like you don't matter. okay, well, what did your mother do?
Yeah.
Very far. So I think the studying for me became more of a life practice. Like to this day, my friends are like, why did you go to this workshop? Like, you know so much about that shit. And I'm like, well, that's why I know so much about it, is because I continue. It's not a one-time, like the brain is a muscle, you know?
Yeah.
And so is the heart, by the way. So the emotions and everything, it's all like, if I don't feel for a week or two and I make myself not feel as an exercise, I will not exactly remember how to feel. Like I'll start to atrophy in my experience of feeling. There was a guy I interviewed years ago in one of my articles I was writing about this. He's a scientist, and he did this experimental research that tears. So if you think of it as like tears as liquid, but if you were to remove the liquid, you'd end up with a powder, like it's salty, right? You'd end up with and if you were to do that on like lots and lots of tears, you'd end up with like a pile of sugar looking, white powder. And if you were to give that to a small animal, like a little rabbit, it would die. Like there's something about that, if you don't let your tears come out and if you don't let your feelings be expressed, eventually it's that level of toxicity. It's a toxin in your body that at first, like everything, it's like it's small, but like, beaches are made of very small things, eventually they become very, very big. So I'm a big proponent and believer in treating everything, like every conversation that needs to happen has to happen, and every disagreement we have has to be resolved. Like people are like, but it's such a small thing. It's like, no, like if you have a small grain of sand in your shoe, you make a hole in your foot,
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so I'm really curious now about the book that you've recently written.
Yes.
It's been a while since you've written a book, and I do want to ask you about the book you wrote because it's about accountability.
Yes.
Which is a super fascinating topic, right? What do you call it? What's the title? Who'd you write it for? What do you want it to do for them?
So the title, my agent has asked me not to
reveal.
Put it out publicly.
Okay. All right. We're going to skip the title.
That we're not doing. But
by the time this comes out, okay, who'd you write it for and what will it do for this reader?
I'd be happy to come back and talk more with you when the book is out, because I do think that it will have very intriguing. So who the book is for is really for anyone who has the topic of weight as an issue. Obviously, there will be that direct, it'll be a direct effect on someone who's struggling with finding themselves in front of refrigerators, at 300 and some pounds. But everyone that's been reading it says that, as you said at the beginning of our conversation, said that they may not have a problem with their food, but they could apply it completely to other situations in their lives. And so I hate people who say it's for everyone, about everything. Not really, because it's a very poignant book. Like it's difficult to read. Some of my friends have expressed a little bit of, especially people who know me and love me, and some of it is spoken so raw and so honestly and so profoundly that some of it is a little bit painful, because if you care about someone, to read some of the struggles they've had, it's painful. So it's an easy read in some ways, because it's all stories and it's written like a memoir, but it has a quality of you watching someone through a journey of their weight. So that's what the book is about. It's about both losing the weight, but also some of the gaining of the weight. Like, why did I need to build a castle around myself and walked around with such a large amount of cover and protection, which, as you probably know, even if you don't seem to have a weight issue, doesn't work. You don't hide from yourself,
Yeah. I remember the first time someone pointed out that whenever we put on a suit of armor,
yes.
Emotionally speaking, that it becomes a limitation to our own growth. Yes, it protects us, it serves us in some way, but it also limits us in some way.
And it limits us when we're 5, because, it protects us when we're 5, maybe, but there's lots of things we don't need as adults that we did as children. And somehow, I'm sure you've heard of this elephant story. It's one of my favorite stories, where in a circus, they take young elephants, like when they're very, very young, and they attach them to walls with a chain. And the elephant tries and tries and tries and pulls, and the chain stays in the wall because they're small, in the wall and the chain. But as the elephant grows, it's less and less of a chain. And at the end, it's like a little rope attached to this little, nothing. And the elephant doesn't try because it remembers that he couldn't do it, when now he could probably pull the entire building with it. doesn't try to do it. And as people, we end up doing a similar thing. Like as a 5-year-old, I didn't know how to protect myself, so weight made sense. But as a 50-year-old, I'm completely capable and able. And so I think there's some people need a little bit of a reboot, like almost like re-question. The beginning of my work on myself, I used to talk about, I would go to the seminar, I would go to a class or whatever, and I would feel like I was taking all these parts of myself as if they were puzzle pieces, let's say, and I would question. I would be like, are you mine? Is this something that's really, is this belief mine? Is this behavior mine? Is this response I'm having to something mine? Because if it's not, it could easily be somebody else's, and I don't wear your shoes. I don't want to wear your beliefs. I want to make sure that my beliefs serve me. And if you don't, you were talking about service earlier, which is one of my favorite words. It's like you have to start with serving yourself. Like people that serve others and don't serve themselves, they're martyrs, and they can't be of service. Really, they're not of service. They're dealing with their own need to be appreciated and give meaning to their lives of sorts. But it starts with ourselves. And to me, the onset of serving myself was, who are you? What tricks you? What makes you happy? What makes you miserable? What makes you respond like someone hurt you and they just said, it's 3:00? Like something completely neutral, and you jump off, like an insane person. It's like, why did I respond like that? And people often don't seem that interested in figuring out why, or what made them, respond that way. And it's fascinating, because what else is interesting? Like what other mountain is there to climb, right? What moon is there to go visit? Like,
there's always something on Netflix, like
there is. Yes. And you know what? I used to be a little bit more drastic and like becoming more. Netflix is wonderful. Like I love watching something that's uplifting or funny or challenging or makes me, I'm obsessed. Did you see Fleabag?
No, I haven't even heard of it. What is it?
You must watch Fleabag. It's this young woman. She's English. I think have you watched Killing Eve?
I haven't heard of that either.
Oh my. Okay.
I'm learning a lot here. Keep going.
We need to do a little, no. So, I mean, joking aside, it's like it's all part of it. It's not like all of a sudden now all I can do is tie my shoes. It's like you tie your shoes, then you put your pants on, or the other way around. You put your pants on, your shoes, put a shirt, put a thing. It's like getting out of your house, meaning getting out in your life, is a lot about, can we do all the parts? And some people develop their mental capabilities, but they don't do anything with their emotional. Some people are emotional, whatever the word is, like that's all they do is they feel their feelings, and that's beautiful, but it's also not holistic and not complete. Some people have no understanding of their psychology, like why they do what they do. And, they find themselves drinking or abusing or yelling or whatever, and they have no idea how they got there. It's like, what else is important? What else could you possibly be doing? And yes, in between doing that, you can watch some Netflix.
Yes. So you talk about on this topic of service and the importance of serving ourselves, as you're saying, taking care of ourselves as well. I came across an interesting concept that you've talked about how in some ways addiction parallels being healthy.
Yes.
Right. And that was something I'd never thought of it that way. But of course, there's always two sides to a coin.
Yes.
But will you say more about that? And then I do want to go into, like, because of being healthy, if taking care of ourselves is a way we can be healthy as an alternative to addiction and unhealthy behavior. If you will, please start with what's this parallel between addiction and being healthy? And then how can we take care of ourselves?
Well, addiction is a really interesting concept because to me, it implies that my body is doing something that I can't seem to not do. I know when I was eating sugar, I don't touch processed sugar. I haven't touched processed sugar in some 10, 15 years.
Even in things like ketchup? Like you're totally conscious?
I don't do ketchup. I completely do not touch. And the only sugar I eat is fruit, and not even much. And I do berries because their glycemic index is very low. Like I don't mess with my insulin. That's one of my victories with my body, was to understand the chemicals of it and how it functions. And if I don't do protein to start my day, by noon, my energy becomes completely whacked, and I want sugar and I want coffee and I want all these things. So I don't feed myself with any substance that alters my state of consciousness. So I don't do coffee. I don't do caffeine in general. I don't do sugar. I don't do weed. I don't do wine. I don't do alcohol. And that's not a, moral, ethical, you shouldn't do it. It's just, I enjoy people ask me all the time, like, what do you do when you're tired? And I'll say, well, I rest. Like, other people do coffee or they do substances, that pick them up. And it's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want.
That is next level thinking, by the way. Right? I mean, so anytime, what's that saying that I think it's attributed to Mark Twain, that anytime you find yourself on the side of the masses, it's time to reform.
Yes.
Right? And the fact the masses are using these energy drinks and large amounts of caffeine or stimulants.
Yes.
And
that's one other way to get, it's like there are reasons, and I think not feeling your feelings, like we were saying earlier, is at the heart of that. I don't want to feel sad. I don't want to feel depressed. I don't want to feel these other things. So these substances are going to help me. So whether I feel depressed, I'll do something that picks me up. If I feel like we're self-medicating all the time, which is really sad, because at the end of the day, all I want is to feel my sadness, and all I want is not to feel my sadness because I don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
But when I learn to do it, and it's a skill, you have to learn to do that, because that's not, I don't know where you were raised, but it's like in France, it is not a response. I'm sad, I feel my sadness. It's, I'm sad, how do I hide that? I'm sad, how do I, do something to avoid this feeling right now? It's never, like you hear it all the time to kids, like, don't cry. It's like, wait, it's a kid, it's feeling. It's like, let it cry. It's the, So the way it relates to addiction for me is, the addiction becomes the substance itself. Like when I eat sugar, which I don't, but when I was eating sugar, it's impossible for me to eat a little bit of it. That's why I don't do it. It's not like on my birthday, last week was my birthday, and people were like, have a little cake, it's your birthday. And it was like, I don't do a little bit of cocaine on my birthday. Like, it's not like, for me, sugar is no joke. It's like, it's really something. The industry of sugar produced too much sugar, and then they started putting it everywhere, and it is an addictive substance, and so people don't even realize that's why they down all they down, but it's because physiologically their bodies is craving it. Like your body develops more candida, and candida, from yeast, and then it's literally a chemical process that your body cannot fight. It cannot really resist it, and so knowing that I'm addicted to sugar, I make the choice not to have any, because I don't like what it feels like, and I have the power not to do it. And so I don't have an interest. I think self-love is at the heart of this conversation that we're not exactly naming. Like, I used to not like myself, and now I think I'm the most precious thing in the universe,
I love to hear you say that. And I wish I could say that all the time, I wish everyone on the earth would say that. But how did you make that? Again, and I know sometimes people who are successful at something is like, well, I don't know, I just did it.
Oh, I hate when people do that.
Yeah.
Oh
so God, how did you do that?
They dismiss their skill. I don't dismiss it. It's a lot of work. It took me a lot of years to get to a place where I could. So it started with confidence and trust, I started watching my word. Like when I'd say I'd do something, I would be conscious to do it. Like, what do you think of your brother who's late all the time? You don't trust him.
So this is amazing. So what I'm hearing you say is that you used to not love yourself.
Yes. I used
now
to
you do.
Trust myself. Yes.
And the first step in your journey to really experiencing yourself as precious, which I love, that's such a beautiful way to say it, is that you began watching your word, or the word I would use, living with integrity.
Yes, integrity is exactly the word I was going to go to. Exactly. Like integrity, people think it's for other people. And like, I'm there when I do something that's not positive, that's not constructive, that's not helping anyone, that's hurting me. I'm the one who's doing it. It's like people don't realize. And literally, I think of it as like, who of my friends is late all the time, which is not keeping your word, right? And it's a small one, like people are used to it. It's traffic. It's like, well, was there not traffic for me? Like I counted traffic and I got here on time. And so what happens when people do that, they don't realize, is when it comes the time to mobilize to go do something, they don't believe they're going to do it because they don't have the confidence that they're going to keep like when I say I'm going to do something, my entire body, my system, my engine, like everything that's inside me, they know. I'm not kidding. It's like, I'm not kidding around. Like I'm going to write a book. My body doesn't go, well, maybe, or I'll sit down, maybe. It's like I sat down for 6 months and worked for 10 hours a day and I wrote my book.
Yeah, that's powerful because I know, in fact, if I'm honest, I find I still live this way in some areas of my life. It's like, well, if I still feel like it, we'll see, that kind of thing. But that's a totally, again, a next level way of living that, if you give your word to something, boom, it's done. The way I like to think of it is And what I'm hearing and what you're saying, it's done. It just hasn't happened yet.
Exactly. Exactly. And that makes a big difference though, because it takes time, like when I started like feeling my feelings, eating healthy. I mean, like I said, it's a very holistic thing, and it took 20 different elements for my weight to become something very easy to manage. But as it was happening, it takes time to lose the weight. And so even from that consciousness that was maybe 15 years ago to 5 years ago, where I would kind of pinpoint, where I feel like I got somewhere, I wasn't completely done, but at least I felt I could buy clothes comfortably. I could sit on a plane without panicking that my seatbelt is not going to close, and, all those things that are like thin people don't really think about, like chairs. You walk in a place and it's like all the chairs have armrests. Well, my ass doesn't fit there. I'm sorry for using that word. My butt doesn't fit there. It's like, okay, well, I need to stand then. And you don't realize that because you don't have to. And it's the same for someone who doesn't hear, or someone who doesn't have the sight, or someone, everyone has their version of having to adapt in some way. Mine happens to be my weight, and,
Yeah.
It was what it was. But the point I was going to make is if you keep your word, your body starts to respond very differently when you need it. Like when you need to mobilize for something, your body will be like, yeah, we keep our word. We do what we say, as opposed to, well, sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Like I tell people, do not make commitments unless you are sure that you're going to keep it. Like I'd rather someone tell me, I may have dinner with you. It may not work for me, so maybe we text that morning. I love that. Like that's one of my favorite things, because by the way, I might that morning not really feel like having dinner. Then you live a life that's a little bit more organic and a little bit more based on trusting that somehow, like it's now, this is so many thoughts. You are so inspiring, Brian. I'm sorry. It's all over the place. I can tell.
No worries.
I can tell it's like really, really inspiring. I'm thinking of like one of the ways that I make commitments now is I actually don't make them. And I accomplish a ton more, and I deliver a ton more than I ever did, but not under the gun, because I would want to respect my word, and I would keep my word and do something that I really didn't want to do. And then you end up in a life that's not the life you want. My book, my personal accountability book that you mentioned earlier, it starts with a scene where two old people are on a bench later in life, like in their 90s, let's say, and one says to the other, so what would you have done differently? And it's this conversation of like, what would you have done? Like, would you have stayed married? And the other guy goes on and on about how he wouldn't have stayed married to this woman he didn't love, and he wouldn't have stayed in this job that was boring to him, and he wouldn't have tried to have relationships with people that because they were family members, but he didn't really was able to connect with these people, whatever it was. It just, we don't see that we are in charge of our lives. And it's right now. This is not a rehearsal. This is it. Like people are literally living their lives not seeing that they are the directors and the actors and the production management as it's happening.
But to see that, we've got to take responsibility, and that can be scary.
Well, not taking responsibility is scarier, no?
Yeah. Well,
the alternative, seriously, Brian, what's the alternative? The alternative is you live a life where you're sailing a boat that you have no idea where it's going.
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's going where other people want it to go.
And it's blowing just because someone said, my opinion is this, my opinion is that. And then there you are, Tokyo, Paris, Morocco.
Yeah.
I want to go where I want to go. And it's not an ego. Sometimes, by the way, there's a lot of room in this particular lifestyle that I have now where others are it's not longer their opinion that matters to me, but it's their advice or their mentoring or their creative, we brainstorm together and we come up with something, but it's no longer, what is this person going to think if I do that? I couldn't care less about what someone thinks at this point. And it's probably offensive to some people, but.
Yeah. Well, so tell me if there's, and I know I'm kind of pushing you in attempting to reduce something that's probably not very simple into a formula that others can understand and apply. But to go back to this conversation about this part about self-love and this integrity being at the beginning, what other steps did you find were necessary along that path for you?
I love that. Of the unusual ones, because I'm sure you've heard a million times many of the other ones, but of the unusual ones, I would say forgiveness became a very important one for me. And I would put self-forgiveness up there very high. Because one of the reasons people have a hard time changing is that they look back and they say, oh my God, I was this person that used to be angry all the time. And so instead of letting go of that, their judgment that it would be so awful that they did that, then they stay with the anger to not work through the forgiveness of it. Do you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So forgiveness was really critical for me also because a friend of mine used to say, like, judgment is a poison that you take hoping that it kills the other guy. And it's true. It's like if I spend my life just judging them, me, it is literally like toxins. Like they've taken pictures of your cells when you have, bouts of judgment or criticism or just harshness vis-a-vis you or somebody else. It's like your cells like start looking like gremlins, like no kidding, like everyone in there just like looks really not happy. And when you say the word, of peace and benefactor and kindness and all these words, like your cells, just start scintillating. Like I'd rather walk around like I'm a Christmas tree, not a, dead plant in a pot in the corner.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I love one thing I heard you say once about if you've got 15 things on your list to accomplish, one of those 15 is to care for yourself.
Yes.
And I know that in our always on, competitive, win at all costs kind of culture, that we often give so much that we deplete ourselves. And you made this really wonderful point. That's like, we don't wait till our car runs out of gas to fill the car, but we do this with ourselves. How can we quit doing that? And why does it matter that we do?
Well, actually, it wouldn't matter if you didn't care to have a life that you love. Like, to me, the reason I put gas in my car and, liquids in my windshield and all of that is so that my car runs smoothly and that it becomes a non-issue. Like, I don't want to have to deal with that the same way I don't want to have to deal with, I'm too tired to go to a movie with a friend because I went to bed at 3:00 last night and I drank all this coffee and I'm all, like taking care of myself ensures a better life. Like I like that life of consciousness, of kindness towards myself. Like, I'm sure you've heard a million times, like, if you treated your friends the way you treat yourself, you'd have no friends. I don't want that. I want to be my best friend. I want to be there and support me and not be a bully. Like lots of people treat themselves like bullies, because maybe that's what they've seen. And okay, so another quality, thank you for asking that, because another quality is the courage to question what you're doing. And a lot of people, and I use the word courage on purpose, maybe a little provocatively, because people don't realize that it takes a little bit of courage to say, why did I do that? And is there a way I could do that would be, obtain better results for me? Just to have the openness and the honesty to kind of look at the behavior and question it, because some of them, they're wonderful. Like some of my behaviors I love and I keep them, and the ones that I don't love, I try to, and at first it's a try because it's a habit to do something. You have to dismember a little bit of you have to dismantle a little bit of the system. Like if I bang your knee will jerk, there's no question. A lot of our thinking is like that. Like if someone says that, bam, I respond that way. And if someone, does that to me, then boom, it means that, No, it's actually, a lot of it is not true. So it is such a big question you're asking. I feel like I'm not exactly answering your question, but.
Well, I'm taking away a lot from what you're saying. And I think that people listening to this will as well. And I know that these things are easy to say and sometimes harder to do, like to say, oh, well, forgiveness is a key. It's an important step. But then when it comes to how do you forgive, that kind of thing. And I think, and this is just my guess, we've all got to find the way to do it that works, for us, what it really means, how to do it. But even hearing someone say, no, this was my transformation and here's what was involved, at least it points people to something, even if they don't know how to do it for themselves.
Yes.
It validates that it's essential.
That everyone, some people are going to do it through their religious practices, and some people are going to do it through, doing a ritual where they go and burn whatever that person did to them. And, I think maybe giving people the benefit of the doubt, giving myself the benefit of the doubt has been a very helpful tool. Like when a situation occurs, like it happened this morning, someone cut me off in the car, and I was, driving to come and be with you, and I wanted to be on time, and I was a little bit of like, whoa, like I I didn't panic, but I had a reaction. And then I thought to myself, I don't know this person. For all I know, she just found out her kid is in the hospital and she's rushing to be by her side. Like, would I be upset if that was the case? And it's like, no, I would get out of the way so she can get to her kid faster, right? And so we often make movies in our heads of what it means and what the other person is, when really we all trying to survive and have the best life we can. And it's like I don't attempt to hurt anybody, but sometimes I could be doing something that somehow steps on your toes, and it becomes your job to say, hey, when you do that, it actually steps on my toes. And then it becomes, well, I care enough about you. How would I do that? So it becomes like a communication. Like it becomes, when I do that, it doesn't mean that. When I do this one behavior, when I leave the toilet seat up, I don't do that to torture you. I do that because I wasn't conscious in that moment. And I was thinking of something else, which was your birthday dinner next week that I want to try to organize. And then the wife is like, oh. And it's like somehow we don't do that. Like we assume the worst in people often.
Yeah.
And I would say that was a giant leap for me to start looking at what people do as, what if they were doing that to serve me and to make me happier? Like I would, it's a better day for sure. And since I don't know, I don't know what motivates them, might as well assume something lovely.
Assume something lovely. That's a wonderful way to say it. And a couple of things that come up for me as I hear you share this is, one is, I think a lot about consciousness and what it means to be a conscious human being, to live more consciously. And again, it's like, I don't know, does that mean you drink kombucha and shop at Whole Foods or drive a Prius? Like, I don't know. But I think that these are the things, to choose the most empowering meaning, to recognize when we're not, to make a different choice when we are, in that situation. And I think as well that, I think to Tony Robbins' work.
Mm-hmm.
I've been a student of Tony's for a few years now, and I love that he ends his seminars with this instruction: make your life a masterpiece. Mm-hmm. And I think what you're saying, these are the strokes that do that. I don't think we ever have one single act where we step into greatness. And of course, greatness is subjective anyway, but it's through the continued application of what we learn and following our inner voice and our highest light and that kind of thing. So I'm really inspired by the things that you're sharing. And I hope that people listening are as well, because some of these things can be platitudes. It can be like, oh yeah, everybody knows that. But then when you live it, when you apply it, or my experience, when you hear it from a certain person, because we all have a different energy.
Or sometimes you hear it at a time where it now really means something to you and you're willing to do something with it.
Yeah.
When I was in my 20s, trust me, people could tell me all they wanted with their food and their diets and this. I wasn't interested. Now I'm like a sponge to every new information I can gather. And, it really depends. I like doing the parallel in a sport. Like, how would you become a worldwide, tennis player? Well, you would practice. You would get on the court. You would get your feet on the court every single day for hours and hours and hours. Like, people want freedom and want, to be expressed or be of service, like all these big words. But it's like you just said, it's every moment of every day, every breath, every choice I make, every moment that passes, I can choose. Like, the question I often ask myself is like, what's the highest choice right now? Because sometimes you have two choices and maybe they're not great, either one, but there might be one that's higher than the other. And to me, higher means more loving for the ones involved, more freedom for the ones involved, more, a result that serves more people. It's like I have my particular, values that are important to me. And I think that's maybe one of the first exercises. What are your values? Like, do you value creativity, which means that, you just do whatever artistic choice you have, or do you value loyalty? And that is what guides, your choices. Like, it really depends on what you say. And that's part of getting to know who you are.
Yeah.
Who are you? Are you someone who's more, interested in following the rules, and that is really what brings you joy? Or are you someone that likes to break them and invent ways? And there's lots of things you can do, like profiles and conversation with your friends. Like, those are my favorite thing. I sit with my friends and have very, very meaningful conversations. Like, have you noticed any change? I've been working on this thing. Do you notice that I'm less this or more that? And I get incredible feedback from my friends, So the same way I would if I was a tennis player, I would say, can you come to the court, like another good tennis player? And I would say, watch me play. Like, what do you see? Like, why I see that you're holding your racket this way or that way. And, you'd get a lot of speed if you did it this other way. And then I try and then it works. And then it's like, yay,
Yeah. I love that. And that reminds me of the saying that the best mirror is often a good friend.
Yes.
Totally.
But that too, Brian, has to be watched for, because when I was in a destructive mindset, my friends were matching that. And so, when I was using drugs or I was, smoking a lot or whatever, like my friends were mirrors of that. And they actually, one of the big challenge that I run into, which is probably one of the reasons I moved countries, like I ended up, leaving France to live here in Los Angeles, is because people want to match. Let's say we were a bunch of smokers and I quit smoking. I'm disturbing for that group, right? Like if I'm no longer willing to participate in this self-destructive behavior, those that are not willing to quit smoking are going to start judging what I do and not want to be blah, blah, blah. So it becomes, the mirror is a good example if you make sure that your friends are already in a path that, I don't know, a friend who would say, stay in the smoking because I miss you when I go at the break. And people say that, people will want you to stay with their particular limitations so you don't confront theirs,
Well, and I think that's the basis of the thought behind this simple saying, misery loves company.
Yes, and happiness loves company.
Happiness loves company.
That's right. Both ways. Like two of my best friends, I just saw them yesterday. It was the birthday for one of them, and it was literally like, what a delicious moment. We were laughing, we were supporting, we were interested in each other, we were like wishing such good things on each other, and it was the most delicious moment. And I know that there are friends that I no longer want to spend time with because they're kind of allergic to happiness and they sabotage all the time, and they seem to, it's like they climb a few steps of better and then they go back. They don't want to. There's a beautiful book you've probably read from Gay Hendricks, The Big Leap. Are you familiar with The Big Leap?
The upper limit problem.
Exactly, the UP. And by the way, Gay Hendricks is a dear, dear friend of mine. And when I was working on the expansion of my company, which we haven't talked too much about, but I also am an entrepreneur. I've built a company that has 10 stores, that's a very successful thing. And I would call Gay and I'd be like, I hit a UP, like, the upper limit problem. And he would be like, well, let's work on that one, shall we? And it was great. You were just like helping me expand my ability, my capability to actually welcome good in my life had also a muscle kind of, I had to learn to expand it and make it bigger than what I came in this world with.
Yeah. Well, that's the journey. That's the journey.
That is the journey.
So I totally, man, we've been talking for almost an hour and I've enjoyed this so much. And there's so much I still want to ask about. I'm just going to acknowledge this, but not pursue it. Maybe we'll come back to it, or maybe there'll be a part 2, or maybe neither. It's fine. I did want to ask you about the personal accountability model, about the victim loop and the accountability loop. But I'm going to just set that aside because I do want to get to Shape House. So in fact, I wondered, you obviously thought about this. You seem to be doing a great job with your branding. But this term, an urban sweat lodge.
Yes.
That's pretty awesome. And as one who only recently has had an experience in a sweat lodge, in a Lakota, maybe a traditional Native American sweat lodge last year, now my antenna are up. I'm like, ooh, an urban sweat lodge. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. It's a beautiful story. So when I was in my early 20s and I was a writer for a French magazine, they sent me on a mission to study this guy, Lewis Mel Madrona, who was doing...
He agreed to be on my show.
I love him.
I asked him if he'll be in September so I can have time to read all his books. I'm in the middle of Healing the Mind Through the Power of Story.
Yes,
anyway,
yes.
That's funny. Okay,
so I went to interview him.
Okay.
That's beautiful. I went to interview him. He was in Pittsburgh at the time. He's not there anymore, but he was the head of psychiatry, I want to say, in this really large, Shady Side hospital. And I went on tour with him to visit some patients, and I was watching him work. And some of the work he was doing was using, so his story is incredible, if you can take 1 second, but he became a doctor. He's an MD and became a doctor from Columbia and Yale and like really, really very, very prominent schools. And then one day there was, in 1 week, 2 women came in for C-sections, delivering babies, and they decided to do C-sections. And two doctors, him and the other guy, basically bid on who was going to go the fastest and went into their operating room. And one of the women died, not the one he was taking care of, but the other one, which definitely, we don't know. She might have died anyway, but for him, it was like, what are we doing, with healing and healing practices? And then in the same week, some guy came in for kidney something and they removed the wrong kidney. And so he had this like awakening of like, what are we doing with this idea of like being practitioners and caregivers? And he pretty much went into the mountains and went to visit his family because he's a coyote, obviously one of the books is called The Coyote Medicine. And so he went to learn, Native Americans' traditions and healing modalities. And of course, sweat lodges was one of them. And so when I went to interview him, he invited me to one. And I'm this like girl from Paris, right? Like I don't even know how to sit on the floor, let alone, in a room that, tent, in a teepee that is like so hot and has no air. But we did it in Santa Barbara in the spirit, in honor of this little boy, Porter, who, it's one of my biggest hit that I've ever had with something that happened, like probably one of my first spiritual stories actually, where, we did a lodge in honor of this boy who was born, somewhat healthy. And then something happened where he became very sick and was having seizures at night and his teeth were growing the wrong way. And he was just like, his digestive system was completely, basically they were saying he was probably not going to pass 10 and he was 4, 5 at the time I met him. So we go to Santa Barbara to do this sweat lodge, and the mother handed him to me, and I'm holding him and he's crying and he's obviously in pain, like at all times. You can see that he's just really trying to manage the cramps and the pain that he's having everywhere. And we locked eyes, this child and I, and he stopped crying. And we just were there together in this like incredible moment. And this mother looked at me like, you are welcome in my house any day. Like you are just a permanent guest at my house. And then we went to so the women attending the fire, and, Lewis is chanting over there and like doing his practices to prepare for the lodge. And the salamanders, I remember, run through the thing, and he was all excited because in his culture it means something, I forget what, but it's like transformation is ahead of us and beautiful thing. The lodge was 6 hours. So I stayed sitting on the floor with literally no air to breathe. Like you go to the ground to like try to get a little bit of air. I remember peeing on myself because you can't get out. And at some point, whatever. And we're chanting and we're having this incredible, literally one of my most incredible experiences. I'm starting to sing in Hebrew. I don't even speak Hebrew, but I'm like chanting this, like something I heard when I was a child. And he's like chanting with me. And at some point, 6 hours later, which has something to do with urban, the word urban in the sweat lodge currently. But at some point he gets clarity of what he needs to do, and he runs to the kitchen and he removes this protein thing that the kid was eating that clearly was not good for him. And Porter is alive, and it's 25 years later.
Wow.
And it's just literally it's the first time that I touch with my own fingers the power of listening and intuiting and trusting and opening yourself to receive wisdom that may come from somewhere else than, school. And the sweating, the symbol of sweating was very much about the releasing of the toxins, the releasing of the noise, almost like the metaphorical noise allowed him to hear this wisdom. And when I started Shape House, it was really very much in honor of him and Porter and all of this culture. And so we called it an urban sweat lodge because, of course, it's certainly not a teepee in the mountains anywhere, but it has to do with, I didn't want to start a company that had to do with like sweat so you're prettier and younger and blah, blah, thinner. Like, it's important, of course, vanity and the way we look, of course, that's all part of our culture. We have bodies. But to me, if I had to commit my life to something, it had to have, gravitas. And I love this experience so much. And we actually had the first one we opened, we hired this young woman to paint the name of the tagline on the wall right in front of one of the houses. And it was going to say an urban sweat lodge. And this woman comes to do, she's like one of these people that can paint, on the outside, like a sign maker, whatever they call themselves. And so she comes and I tell her what we're doing. And she's like, I can't do that. And I was like, why? And she's like, because it's like, it's not your culture. It's like basically you're stealing from this culture. And I was like, wow, like what a distance from what intention was. And it'd be like saying you stole from breathing, you know. Like, to me, it was just I had such a personal experience with it. And so and she said, my partner, my in life, my romantic partner is, I think he was a Lakota. And she was like, I can't come home and tell him that I did that for you. And I said, well, would you let me meet the guy? And she was like, okay, yeah, maybe. So she goes home, talks to the guy, brings the guy. The guy is like 3 times my height. I'm not kidding. Like, the guy was I'm kidding, but he was so big and so like he looked like a pantry, you know, just really solid guy. And he asked that she leaves, that him and I would have time alone. And he said, he sits down like this really big body, and he says, tell me what you're about. What is this about? And I poured my heart to this guy, and I just told him who I was and what I was about and what was my blah, 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 blah. And I just told him my whole life, you know. And he stood up. He didn't say much, but he stood up and he brought her back in. And he said, not only I would like you to do the sign, but I would like you to not charge her.
Wow.
Which is, to this day, like one of the most, I told you I would cry before the end of today. There it is. It was just so moving to, like, he saw my heart and he saw my intentions and he blessed me, you know?
That's beautiful. And that was the first one.
That was it. That was the first one.
That's right there from the origin in the deep. And you're growing.
Yeah, so we have 9. Well, we had 10 because we have one that we only open in the summer in East Hamptons. There's 5 in New York and there are 5 in LA. And we are growing. We're going to go national, probably international. People love sweating now. And when I first started, oh my God, I would go to dinners and people would be like, what are you up to? And I tell my story and they would look at me like, what are you doing? This is the craziest story we've ever heard. And, you know, people would never pay to come sweat. But I think I was inspired. When people ask me where the idea came from, I often think about someone who wrote a song. You know, like at some point you hear something. Again, we don't know where it's from, but you hear a melody or you hear a word or you hear something. And it's like you follow the trail. You kind of like, you pull the thread and you kind of go, what is that? And what does that look like? And how does that? And then it's a creative process. And to answer the question you didn't ask about the book earlier, similarly, it's like, what's the next word? What's the next sentence? What's the next paragraph that's going to help me convey what I want to say? And starting a company is very much that. You know, for me, it was very much a journey of, and what if we did that? And then one day I'll never forget, I was sweating. And I said, oh, it'd be so nice if someone brought me like a wet towel that was like a little cold right now. And then I sat there and I was like, well, I can have someone bring me that. And so now we have in our protocol that midway when it becomes a little harder and you're sweating, you know, someone brings you this like wet and cold towel and it's like delicious. And it was all born out of, wouldn't it be nice if we had tea afterwards, you know, whatever. But all of it was created out of listening and letting it tell me what it wants. Like when you think of it, companies, books, they have an entity of their own. It's like you're birthing them, you know, your children are not yours, you know, your companies are not yours. Yeah. It has that same quality of like, I did what I did to give it life and now I'm watching it do life and I serve it. You know, like people often would say like, how do you know how to grow and how do you know how to do the next city and the next whatever? And I'd be like, I ask it, honestly. I ask Shape House, like, what do you want? What's next for you? You know?
That's amazing. That does make me think of something that Louis Melbadrona talks about, that he says every illness and every story has its own spirit.
Yes.
And in the same way, perhaps every company, you know, everything. So for people who have listened and, you know, they probably heard some of this in the intro, but they don't know exactly what we're talking about. Yes. What Shape House is. People can come sign up for a 55-minute session.
Yes.
Right. So will you describe what is the experience like and why would people want to do it?
Yes. So so when you walk in, you will be explained everything that's going to happen in the next hour. And then you are being walked in an area where you can change. So the sweats happen dressed. And then you are being wrapped very caringly in these beds that are an infrared technology that will very quickly and very efficiently and very healthfully will heat up your body from your core. Like one of the biggest surprise for me when I started doing them is my head would be drenched and my head was not even in the bed, like it wasn't exposed to the heat. So who was heating that? And so I started to study, and I talked to a lot of doctors when we first started doing it, and engineers. And it's really because the way that technology works is that it heats up your body, and then your body heats itself up. Because it's responding, like sweating is a response to heat. Your body has a fever, right? And when you're not well, and then you sweat to break that fever and to cool your body down. And so that's what's happening. We're inciting your body to think that it has a fever somewhat by the exposure to this heat. And then it breaks a sweat to like cool you down, basically, which is why at the end of it, it's a natural effort. Like at the end, your heart is beating like crazy, because to cool something down, it's a lot of effort. Like think of it as the air conditioner at your house. When it's hot and it kicks in, it's a lot of dollars for the air conditioner, because it's a lot of energy to cool something down. And that's what your body is burning while you're in the bed. So once the lady, we all mostly have staff that are women, but when you get wrapped in, you get given a remote control. That's part of my desire was to do something that was really healthy, but also really fun and entertaining. And so you lay down and you watch the Netflix we talked about earlier. You can catch up on the show, and you have your headset, and you're basically laying there for an hour, sweating your head off. When you're done, you will be drenched, from head to toe. Maybe not your very first one, but certainly after that. And the purpose is that when you're done, someone comes and brings you to a relaxed room where you get to sit and have tea and oranges, because we were recommended to give you vitamin C when you're done with your sweat. And in that 55 minutes, you've burned, 1,000 calories. You've regenerated some of the very, like your organs get depleted from the life that we live. And so when you do something like this, you restore by repairing and resting your organs and be able to, it's like restoring a muscle. In order for you to be able to use your muscle, you have to treat it well to begin with. And what the sweat does is it resets your body to almost kind of the way it was before you abused it, in some way. So what we do is not so much healing you, but we allow your body to heal itself. Like we give your body the ability back to heal itself. Because when you think of it right now, we're breathing, we're digesting, like you're moving your head, you're thinking, you're processing what I'm saying, your feet are probably moving a little bit. All of that, your blood is pumping, your heart is beating. It's like all that stuff is going on. We don't do anything for that. It's just going on. We get in the way of that. We get in the way of this incredible magic that our bodies are doing the whole time we're alive. It's like, think of it, like from the moment you start beating your heart to the second you stop breathing, this whole thing is going on. And yet we mistreat it. Like to get back to your image of the car, instead of being respectful of this heart beating, we pump it like crazy, we push it, we stress it, we eat too much sugar and we drink too much coffee and we do all that stuff. And this poor heart is like, okay, I'll try to help you anyway, but it's exhausting. Yeah. Like we literally, like we do a lot to like almost like tie a bow, for our feet, and then we try to run. It's like, well, that's not very efficient,
Yeah. No, it is a miracle, all these things that are going on without our conscious awareness until there's something wrong. Yeah. Something's not working.
Exactly. And then we go all, bonkers on, like people come to us and they're like, overnight, everything broke down. I can't sleep. I can this. And I'm like, overnight? I didn't live with you, but I can assure you that it didn't happen overnight. It's like 30 years of like, torturing this poor being, mentally, emotionally, physically, nutritionally. All of it.
So this is a way for people to help maybe restore, rejuvenate.
Yes.
So many benefits, right? I mean, I've watched some videos of people who've come to Shape House and done this and hear them talk about the better sleep, or, they just feel more energy, they feel more clear, their skin it clears up.
There's a lot of chronic conditions. People have like pains in their back or pains in their legs all the time. And it's like, because again, we're taking the trash out of the kitchen. The kitchen smells good, when you do that, and it feels better. It's like, that's what we're doing. We're taking the trash. People are treating sweat like it's this like second class citizen, like we don't really care. It's like, well, it'd be like, you drink all day and you don't ever go to pee. Your body would like explode. Sweating is a very important system that is not there by, whoever created the body said, well, let's put that little system in there, that just, no, it's like, it's a very deliberate part of the system to eliminate the toxicity that's in it. And a lot of what gets eliminated when you sweat does not get eliminated another way. It's not like, well, I pee a lot. It's like, well, yes, but it's not the same process and the same systems that eliminates that. And so, there's people that I've heard recently, there are people that are injecting Botox in their armpits to make their bodies not sweat. And I heard that and I just cried. I just sat there like, oh, like, what are you doing to your body? It's like you remove the chute to down the trash from your house. It's like now it's going to be piling up.
Yeah.
Crazy. So the benefits are really, and I found out a lot of the benefits from watching people. At first we had hundreds of people who came, and I don't have insomnia, so I didn't know. But like this woman started coming and now she sleeps without sleeping pills,
Yeah, that's a gift.
That is really a gift because, when you think of it, it's like managing our stress, or rather managing our peace and, mindful practices and all that. It's kind of the new, we've gone as far as we can with the way people work out or the way people, I think of it as like nutrition and athleticism. It's like all that stuff. It's like we've explored. It's like we know it's good for you to do some cardio, and it's good for you to drink enough water. It's like we've gone pretty far in all that, but restoring and rejuvenating and meditating and refilling the cup, we know nothing about that. I mean, we do when we do the kind of practices you and I do, but most people don't. And so they're treating the way you spoke of the car earlier. They don't put gas, and then they're surprised that midway the car breaks down on the freeway. It's like, dude, it should have broken down 17 miles away earlier because, we don't treat it well. And so sweating is a smart way, and this is really not a plug for sweating at Shape House. You can just, sweat in your bathtub. I don't care. It's like just let your body sweat so it has a chance to eliminate everything that prevents it from functioning well, Now,
I think I've sensed that intuitively because, I live in Utah. I live in the desert, and I love the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, and I love going to Phoenix when it's 110 degrees, and I'll get in the car, and just sit, not start the car, not turn on the AC, and just feel the skin.
That's a portable Shape House. You've created a portable Shape House. You're just missing this girl who brings you tea and oranges when you're done.
I could use that cool towel. That's amazing. So obviously you've got big plans for Shape House, and I think there are people who are looking for this that don't even know they are yet, right? They're not aware of it. So at some point, people listening to this will very likely be able to find this in whatever city they're in. But in the meantime, for those who want to experience this, what do they need to do?
So one of the protocols we developed at the beginning when people would travel and, they couldn't, because once you start sweating, it's a little bit like when you start doing, facials, and it's like your body now is like, my skin feels really dry. It's like, well, it is really dry. So you do something and those habits, which is what I want. I want people to start developing a sense of what it feels like to be detoxed. And then I don't need to tell them how often to come. It's not my business. It's like, I can tell you, try it, see what it feels like when your body functions optimally, because you don't, you remove the salt and the grains that are on the path of that liquid that's trying to basically fill you at 80%. So when you remove all that stuff, you create an environment where your body is just able to function so much better that when people would come to us and they would experience that, and then they would leave and they'd be like, now I'm going to New York for 3 weeks. Well, now we have stores in New York, but we didn't for a long time. So if you live in Wichita and we don't have a Shape House, one of the ways is do it in your bathtub. So your knees have to be in the water. So that's an important piece. So if your bathtub is too small, go to a friend's house who has a bigger tub, but your knees have to be in the water. That's an important piece. Like you have to be immersed, all the way
down like to your neck.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, not uncomfortably. Like I don't need you to be completely immersed, like you barely can, breathe or something. Be comfortable so your head is out of the water, but your knees have to be in the water and your whole body has to be immersed. And then you want to put ginger and lemons, and make sure the lemons are organic. That's important because the heat is going to pull everything that's in the skin of that lemon. And you don't need to press it or juice it, just cut it in half. I put 4 lemons, cut in half. And so they're floating in my bathtub. And ginger. And ginger, if you can do it fresh and just grate it and do it fresh, it's great. If not, you can do it in powder. It works a lot better if it's grated.
How much ginger?
I usually would do the size of the palm of my hand, like a root, like how it usually sells as like a little cluster, like one of those clusters. And I just grate it, and like, it doesn't have to be, you don't need to remove the skin because it's going to happen in the hot water anyway. And get the water to be as hot as you can bear it. And then once you start sweating, that's the key. That's the thing that people may not want to do, but that's really where the gem is you want to stay in the water for 20 minutes. And you add hot water to maintain what's happening, but your body will, so the second you start sweating, which you'll feel, when you take a bath, you have a little bit of sweat on your forehead, let's say, that's where it starts. Your body is sweating, but it's in the water, so you don't feel it. And so on your forehead, you feel that little, kind of getting dewy. That's the start of 20 minutes. And then you want to stay in that state for 20 minutes. And that will give you pretty much what you get when you come.
So are you saying a total of 40? Is 20 to get there and then another 20?
It doesn't necessarily take 20 to get there. I don't know. It depends on the bathtub. It depends on your body. It depends on the temperature. Like, it really depends on what you do. But once you start sweating, so say 10 minutes in, 15 minutes in, 5 minutes in, depending. After that, 20 minutes in the water.
So then once you feel the forehead get dewy,
that's it.
Then
that's really what matters is when it starts to do that. And whatever time it takes to do that, then you wait until it happens. But when you start, it shouldn't take too long. Mine probably, I have a pretty tall tub on purpose so I can sweat here sometimes. But maybe 10 minutes, I'll start feeling pretty dewy. And then 20 minutes.
So even dudes can do this?
Oh, particularly dudes. My God.
Okay. I'm just checking, just making sure I'm not violating any protocols or anything.
Nope. It's good for everyone. And you'll feel it. You'll lay down. You'll be a little tired because it sucked some stuff out of you. I don't recommend doing it, if you're going out and planning on drinking a lot tonight because your body just worked hard to, empty the trash. So give it a moment. But if you can rest at night, it's like, they used to do that not exactly that, but you would do that when you had a fever and you kind of put the kid in hot and then you would put them in the blanket and they would like sweat it out. That's what happens. So if you can go lay down and relax and try not to watch the news, because your body will feel very open and vulnerable because you literally open your pores and let some out,
Yeah.
That's my recommendation.
That sounds amazing. I want to experience it right now. Well, I want to finish the interview and then
and go buy ginger and lemon.
Yeah. I can imagine how I would sleep so soundly after that. It just sounds phenomenal.
I am telling you, one of my best friends, Adam, the first time he came in, some of my friends, it's bizarre to me. Like, some of my friends have known about it for 2 years and they still haven't come, They kind of like, oh, I'll do it. It's like, whatever. They freak out. Like, they don't want to try or whatever. Like, I'm like, well, I'll try anything at least once. My friend Adam, who actually has trouble sleeping, came after a long time. Like, maybe I'd opened a year and a half or something, and he came finally because I think it was my birthday. And I was like, you are coming to sweat for my birthday. Like, I made it like a thing. And he came, and I'm telling you, the next morning he like texted me and he was just like, I slept 10 hours straight. And the guy is like insomniac.
Wow.
He doesn't sleep that well. He was just like, he literally felt so rested. Because that's the other thing. It's like something, not only do you sleep more when you sweat regularly, but it's not just that. The way that you rest your body is more holistic. Again, so your hormones are more rested, your digestive system is more rested, your brain is more rested because you've hydrated. That's the other thing we didn't talk about. When you sweat regularly, you actually hydrate better, which is kind of crazy. But when you have toxins in your body has a hard time letting the water and the liquids go to your organs because it's busy and it's clogged and it's like, and also your organs are not stupid. They're like, I'm not letting you in. You're toxic. Like, I'm not letting water. That's why I've become a bit of a activist for drinking, as clean as you can water.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's penetrating in your organs. It's going in there. So if you're drinking, something that has chlorine in it a lot and some of that stuff, it's kind of like, well, you're kind of putting the poison directly into your organs. Not a smart move,
Yeah. No, I just recently read about these forever chemicals that are in our water.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, these things we don't even know we're doing to ourselves.
Yeah.
How much water should a person drink in a given day? Just, I understand activity increases it. Sweating obviously would probably increase that, but just what's your answer to how do we know how much water we should drink in a day?
My cute answer is not enough.
Yeah.
You're not drinking enough as we speak. So people drink when they're thirsty, and that's already far down the dehydration path. You know, when you drink because you're thirsty, like you feel that thirst, it's already like you need to quench because you've already parched the inside. So first of all, there was something you said that's not exactly accurate. Yes, you drink more when you're sweating. Like while you're sweating, we give you alkaline water, which is a clever way to get you to hydrate fast. Strangely, when you sweat regularly, you need less water.
Interesting.
People are downing, like sometimes we see people coming to us and they're like downing like a gallon and a half, you know, of like, there is such a thing as too much water, by the way.
Yeah, people can die from this.
Yes, you can die. I mean, that even is extreme, but like even diluting your enzymes. And it's just that there's so much that can happen from being too, you know, drenched. So there's that. Also, if you drink the wrong kind of water, your body can drink like 17 gallons. You won't be hydrated because it's, like I said, your body is very smart and it creates a buffer. So if you drink water that's toxic, like if you were to drink water from a pool, your body is like, it is not happening. You will pee directly, like it will go directly to your bladder and it will not let it go to your organs because your body is incredibly, incredibly clever. The other thing that was incredible, by the way, just as an aside, it's like people would drink all this water and they'd be like, don't I want to pee while I'm in the bed? Like, I don't want to, you know, like I'm sweating. Am I not going to want to go to the bathroom midway? And it's like, no, because your body, as you're drinking in the bed, it knows to not bring it to your bladder. It literally knows to give it to your body to sweat as like a compliment, you know? Brilliant. It's just the body so brilliant. And so, you know, I hate those questions. I'm sorry. I love you plenty, but I really don't like questions because it depends.
Yeah.
It really depends on your life. You know, if you have a life where you are detoxed and you do a lot of sweating regularly, you don't need as much as what the common culture is saying, you know. And also, I drink a water right now that's called Rising Springs. I'm going to plug for them. I know the girl, but it's not, and we obviously don't benefit from it, but it's water. And it's actually no, it's not in Utah, it's in Idaho. The source is in Idaho and it's 2.5 miles down on the ground, you know, underground. And it is 9.5 alkaline without going through a machine, meaning in 5 years, that water will still be at the same alkaline level, which is not what you find at Whole Foods, by the way. Wow. Like once the alkaline in the water is made alkalized, it's only 2 or 3 days. And so when you buy that from stores, there's a good chance it's not alkaline anymore. But that's besides the point. So good water is important. And when I drink that water, which is extremely nurturing and extremely hydrating, honestly, a couple of cups during the day and I feel super hydrated. So hard to answer that question.
That depends. I've heard the latest number I feel guilty for not achieving is 1/2. So divide my body weight in half and then drink that many ounces.
So here's the other thing. Do you remember at the very beginning when we talk about keeping your word?
Yeah.
What you just said, like even the concept of like, I should drink that much water and I don't drink it.
Right.
That's yet another way that you let your body down, that you let yourself down, and that your body kind of records that it's like, oh, next time she says something, probably won't mean it.
Yeah.
I'd rather say I drink as much as I can, or I'd rather say I drink really good water so I don't drink it as much as, you know, I used to because I don't need it. It's like I like to treat what I say. Like I turn my phrases so that it turns into something that's not like I let myself down and didn't do what I said I was going to do.
Yeah. I can imagine. And I like that approach. I really do. And at the same time, I can hear how someone might interpret that as, oh, well, sure, you just let yourself off the hook. You just have a really low standard. It's easy to, you know, but I know
it's not true.
Explore that for themselves, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to turn now to the enlightening lightning round. If you're okay with that, I have about 10 questions.
Okay.
That I like to ask each guest.
I'm all yours.
All right. So, first question: without using a box of chocolates in your response, please complete the following sentence. Life is like a
hopscotch.
Okay.
A game of hopscotch.
All right. Next question. What's something at which you wish you were better?
Showing my humanity.
Okay. Next question. If you were required every day for the rest of your life to wear a t-shirt with a slogan on it, or a phrase or a saying or a quote or a quip, what would the shirt say? It
would have the word love, and then there would be me and you. like, you know what I mean? Like, it would be like love me and love you would be like being loved and being loved by myself and loving others. It would have something to do with that. Like, I would really love that. I just saw it as you were saying. I'm going to design one.
Okay. That's great. What book, other than your own, have you gifted or recommended most often?
The Little Prince.
Saint Exupéry. How to say it?
Saint-Exupéry.
Yeah. Right on. Next question. You travel a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What's one travel hack, meaning something you do or something you take with you when you travel to make your travel less painful or more enjoyable?
Better make more money so I can travel in better circumstances, like better seat on the plane, better comfort.
Oh, yes. That makes a big difference, doesn't it? Especially those lay flat seats.
Yes.
What's one thing you've started or stopped doing in order to live or age well?
Self-criticism.
Okay.
Obviously stopping.
Yes.
Not starting.
Yeah, not starting. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification.
In case, you know.
I'm going to circle back to the question about The Little Prince.
Okay.
Why that book?
Because it has everything. My favorite one is when he goes. So The Little Prince is a series of stories. It's supposedly written for children, but absolutely not. And if you have not read it as an adult, buy it today. That's how much I recommend it. I think I've gifted it. One year I bought 50 copies, and that's all I gift everybody. So it's the book I take to an island if I ever go there.
Wow.
So there's one story where he meets someone who's a doctor, supposedly. So the Little Prince travels all these different planets and he meets all these different people and stories, and it's kind of a tale of wisdom and philosophy. And so he goes to this place and meets the doctor, and the doctor says, so the Little Prince says, so what do you do? What are you about? And the doctor said, well, I just invented a new medicine, a new pill. And the Little Prince says, well, what is it for? And he goes, it's for quenching thirst. Like, you won't ever be thirsty again. And the Little Prince says, why? Why would you have invented that? And the doctor says, because you'd save time. You save at least 28 minutes a week by not drinking the water. And the Little Prince pauses and says, if I had 28 minutes, I would very slowly walk towards a fountain.
That's lovely.
That's why, because it's poetic and it's not meant to hit your goals. And it's just a poetic way to remember what matters.
I love that. What's one thing you wish every American knew?
Can I go to every human on the planet and not just Americans?
I will accept that. However, my request is, so that I think that's great. Let's start there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
My wish for everybody would be that they realize the magic and the power they hold in their own hands to create lives that are meaningful to them, like that people actually would awaken to that.
That's beautiful. Okay.
Do you see why I don't want just Americans to have it?
Sure. Absolutely. And at the same time, I love the responses. Like, I even asked this to one woman. She's a Latina, and she said, do you mean what did she say? North American, or something. Yeah. But just the different ways people answer that. And
mine is more about more.
It's more about more. Absolutely. Okay. What is the best relationship advice you've ever received and successfully applied?
I feel like a broken record. Love yourself, forgive yourself, bring healed as much as you can human to the relationship. Like, the more you heal yourself, the more you bring someone that can contribute and listen and not react and not project and not do all those things we do when we don't know who we are.
Setting aside compound interest, what's the most useful thing you've ever learned about money? Or what's the best thing you do related to money, either in your business or your personal life?
I'm so excited you asked that. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I just started a practice. So a friend of mine that I respect, you may know him, Dave Burns. Do you know Dave?
I don't know Dave yet.
Super great guy. And he also does some masculine and feminine work, and beautiful guy. But we were talking about money, and he said, do you know that the spirit of money is feminine? And I was like, no. It was like, it's fickle. And it's like, he has all these words to like describe, why the spirit of money, was more of a feminine energy. And it's also a relationship. We have a relationship with money the way we have a relationship with people and with ourselves and all of that.
And food.
And food, exactly. And so my new practice, which I started 21 days ago, and I'm going for 60 days, so we'll report. But already I can tell you there's very, very subtle but very powerful shifts. So he gifted me, as we kind of named this a spirit, like the spirit of money, he gifted me a little, what do you call them, a pawn from a chessboard that someone had carved for him, like it's hand carved, and he took one of the pieces to give it to me. And we kind of jokingly and sweetly said, when I'm done with my practice, I will hand it to somebody else. Like, we're going to make it like a chain of like, everybody can do it, right? So the pawn itself becomes filled with this beautiful energy. And so I spend 10 minutes with it in the morning with my pawn. I literally sit on my bed and talk to my pawn. I'm so glad you asked. And we have this delightful conversation about, I would like more of you in my life because I want to be more of service, but I also want to travel business every time I travel. And so it's like a combination of like sweet and happy and service, but also betterment of my life. And 10 minutes, I just chat with my thing for 10 minutes. That's my practice. And that's my best advice. Treat it like it's a relationship.
I'm reminded of this idea, what you focus on expands.
Yes. Yes. Can you imagine if you focus on it with love and not a sense of lack and not a sense of, entitlement? Like, it really, like, I don't treat my friends with entitlements. I don't treat my friends with, a sense of lack. I know exactly how to be a friend. So be a friend to money.
Does the pawn talk back?
Sometimes, I'll tell you, sometimes I did get, like a couple of days ago, I got a suggestion for something, and I may invest in a venture of a friend of mine that was suggested in that moment, which I treated as very sacred, of course.
Wow. That's great. Well, I love that you even knew day 21 of 60. That's awesome. Well, that's great. Before we get to this about the creative process, about your creative process, I want to be sure that I get this in here, which is two things. One is as an expression of gratitude to you for making time to share of your wisdom, your experience with me and everyone listening. I've gone on kiva.org and made a $100 microloan on your behalf to a female entrepreneur in Pakistan.
Aww.
So named Nasim, she's a 42-year-old woman who's been running a private school, and she'll use this to repair the school building and also to purchase furniture.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you. Incredibly. Nothing could make me happier. Thank you.
Oh. And then the other thing that I want to include here, and not just leave it to the very end, is if people want to learn more from you or connect with you or learn more about Shape House or anything you're up to, what would you have them do?
Shapehouse.com is online, and it's a very good source of information. We're on Instagram, Shape House, and then my name is Sophie Chiche, Chiche, and that's my Instagram, Sophie Chiche. That's kind of the best ways, you can always, if there's something specific that I can help or be of service, my email is sophie@shapehouse.com. You can always email me if there's something I can do that I can do. People ask me sometimes, they ask me things that I'm like, no, I do not know how to raise an elephant, but thank you for asking. It's like weird things. But if it's something that I can help without involving me stopping my life too much, I'd be happy to support. So that's one other one.
Okay. So the final part of our interview here, let's talk about the creative process. So you studied journalism.
Mm-hmm.
You know a thing or two about writing. You've written one book. You've actually written two. You've published one. Who has been important for you in your development as a writer, and what did you learn from them?
Oh, the first thing that came to mind, lots of people, because I read and I, talk a lot. So the first thing that came to mind, though, is when I was first hired to be a correspondent for a French magazine, and I lived in LA, and we met, and with the head of the magazine, the editor-in-chief, and he was really wanting someone on the West Coast to discuss psychology, novelties, and everything that was happening here. And we met, and there was this really funny thing where he said, tell me 3 things that are on your mind that interest you right now. And I said, body image, like I was losing weight, and I was very interested in that process, and parenting, because I just had a child, and creativity, as a matter of fact, as a process to get to know yourself. And he laughed, and he pulled the 3 next issues, and literally one was like parenting, creativity, and, weight, whatever the title was in French. But the 3 big dossiers for the next 3 months were about that. And he was like, well, I guess you're writing for one of each for each one, And so, and as I walked away, I turned around and we had this really sweet moment where I said, but wait, you don't know if I can write. And he said, you can speak, you can write. And that was one of the biggest advice anyone's ever given me, which is write like you speak, and like people that think, I'm not a poet. I write what I write, but people think they have to make these really complicated sentences. And, the other advice that someone gave me that I love about writing was have an idea per thought. A sentence per idea, an idea per sentence and a sentence per idea. Like write in a way that, if you're writing that kind of book, obviously, that's not a role. That's my role. Let's just say for what I write. But it's like sentences where you're like 1 idea, 2 ideas, 3 ideas. Like by the end of the sentence, you're like, that's a lot of ideas. Like I make shorter sentences, and every sentence adds something to the conversation or to the writing I'm doing. And it's only 1 idea per sentence and only 1 sentence per idea.
It sounds easy.
It's one of those. It's like, I don't know if I do that because I'm skilled or because I'm gifted. I don't know.
Yeah. So earlier in this conversation, you mentioned that you devoted 6 months to get this book that shall remain titleless until you publish it.
Until
completed.
It's born, yes.
Yeah. Tell me, what did that look like for you? Because clearly, life didn't stop for you to get your book written. There's never a good time to do this. It's never easy. But what did you do that allowed you to get your book done? What was the process or the approach that you followed?
So that's such really good questions. Thank you. The obvious one is get your butt in a chair and type. That's like, people don't realize, they're like, I want to write a book. And it's like, well, are you sitting? Are you writing? It's like, no, not really. It's like, okay, well, in order to run a marathon, you got to put the shoes on and start running. Like, that's really no way around that. What was powerful for me was I went to a retreat, actually. A friend of mine organized these retreats where for 5 days, you read together during the day, and then you spend a little time with her, and she helps a little bit the structure. My challenge was a bit of the structural of the book. Like I could see the stories individually being really powerful, but I couldn't exactly see the thread. That's the other thing. That's my biggest advice in life. Find out what you're really good at, and then be okay to ask for help for the things that you're not. It's a really, it sounds really obvious, but people are weird. It's like they want to do the whole thing, particularly, I'm sorry, of your genre. Like men are particularly wired that way, where it's like they have to figure it all out. It's like, ask questions, meet people that know what to. So this woman organized these retreats, and I decided to go, and it was a 5-day thing. And I walked out of there with my outline. I have to say, she was very helpful. I was inspired by what she said, and together we came up with the structure. And once you have the structure, then you're in heaven, because then you just fill in. It's like having the bones of your meal. There is an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert, and now you just have to go get the ingredients. And so that to me was a very big thing. I work really well early in the morning. And I happen to love waking up early. My rhythm as I was writing this book became a little bit crazy, to be honest, because I didn't have that much time to write it. And so I would wake up often at like 5, and I would work till 8:30. And that was generating new content. Like nobody, no noise, the house is quiet, the world is not awake yet, And so I would spend 3.5 hours, which honestly, when you're sitting down, you're writing, it's a lot of hours. Like it's a lot of writing if you're focused, At 8:30, I would do my day, emails, work, manage, whatever, do my thing. And around 11, and that's really a trick that I discovered days into starting. is I have a friend who was also writing a book, and I invited him to come write with me. Meaning he would arrive here at 11 and we would write from 11 to 3. And that was more editing. So the hours during the day were editing hours for me, and then generating early morning. And so sometimes he would read what I wrote, and sometimes I would read what he wrote, and we would support each other with like, yeah, let's try something else. Or I'm watching you, you're not writing, what are you doing? And we're just like, somehow the fact that he would show up at 11 to write made a huge difference, because all of a sudden I had an appointment with somebody else, not just with myself. And my agent reminded me recently, and because I was like, it's not going very fast. And I was like complaining because I'm impatient and whatever. And she was like, some people write their memoirs in freaking 10 years. Like, shut up. Like, she was just like mad at me for being so that was a good trick. The other trick for me was the tools. Make sure your computer's charged, make sure your pens or whatever you want to write, like your things. Make sure your things, like for me, it was important to print my stuff and read it on paper. So stupid thing, but like not having ink for my printer, would stop my process.
Yeah.
You're familiar with David Allen, probably. Do you know David?
Sure. Getting things done.
So I did Getting Things Done when I was 16 years old. Like, it's odd because I met him and I loved his energy and I studied. I'm a very deep studier of his work. I actually taught it for a minute. But it takes 25 minutes for your brain to reach a capacity of, especially in creativity. If you're doing mundane tasks, it's fine. But if you interrupt your process, so having my 3.5 hours in the morning like that from 5 to 8:30 where no one knew to bother me, or everyone knew not to bother me, rather, it's like there's no need to ramp up. It's like I just stay up there, and it's like stay and stay and stay. And sometimes I don't like what I write, but I write it. So just my hands keep moving, and then I erase. It's no big deal. You can always edit, So get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out. Even if you're like, I don't know how to go from this to this, write it anyway. Yeah. It doesn't have to be perfect. That's the point of editing. And that's the point of asking people help. So I think less ego is a good advice. Just go at it like with a little bit more humility. And it doesn't have to be perfect. You're just trying to tell a story that hopefully will inspire one person, and that's worth the exercise.
So if I understand what you're saying, that all of that writing from the 5 to 8:30 and then the editing from 11 on, that took place once you had the outline from the retreat, the structure.
Yeah, so actually, yes.
Now it's all occurring within that, right? Because I've experienced that in myself and in talking to and working with other writers, that when they don't have a strong sense of the skeleton, of the framework, that
it's impossible. Honestly, I mean, I don't know for sure, but I would find that very difficult to write.
Yeah. So how did you deal with what I think is an inevitability for everyone who engages in a creative process, which is the inner critic? That like, okay, yes, this is the structure. Like, how did you manage to preserve the confidence that the structure was good enough and it was the way it was, and then what you would write was, worth telling? And like, how did you become the victor over your inner critic?
I would say that was probably the work before. That's the work I was telling you about before.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't do it while I did not experience a lot of, I write a sentence, I don't like it, I erase it, or I change it, or I'm not super attached to spitting out like the perfect sentence.
Yeah.
Because I have worked on my inner critic, and then I would test it. Like, that's a good exercise too. It's like, put it out, like ask a friend to read it. And it's like, I don't feel your heart, give me more heart. Or I don't get the story, like what's going on from this to this. And not take it personally, just take it as like, you know how to fill in the blank because it's your life. I'm talking about memoirs, not novels. Everything I'm saying is about, personal writing, which can turn into a book. It could be a journaling. Like, this is not about novels. I know nothing about that. So Nothing I'm saying is about that.
So is this process that you followed from 5 to 8:30, is that what you observed for 6 months?
Yes.
Wow.
Saturday and Sunday included.
That's pretty hardcore. That's pretty disciplined.
It really was. But you know what? It would be like saying my beloved wants to spend 3 hours with me in the morning. Like, I developed a relationship with this book that was so precious and so beautiful and so sacred. I would wake up and I'd be like, let's go, like this joyful. And you can't do that if the whole 3 hours you're pounding on yourself as, not being a good writer. So you have to do self-love work first, that it becomes a pleasant experience and a joyful experience.
What rituals did you have around your writing? I mean, aside from making sure the printer toner was was in there, but
not a small one. Make sure your tool's out up and at it.
Yeah.
One of my rituals was the time for me felt very much like a ritual. Waking up on time, and there was something about. That's funny. I didn't see it as a ritual, but it is a ritual. Like, not that I'm here to share private things, but I sleep naked, and writing started with getting dressed. Like, I would put on a particular outfit that to me is like particular sweatpants, particular top that felt comfortable, not irritating to my skin. Like, there was a little bit of like, I'm running a marathon, I better put my good shoes on a little bit. So there was that. There was the getting dressed and kind of getting in the mindset. Like, my body, I think, knew that it was like, okay, we're doing it. I purchased a tray that had a pillow underneath, and I glued my computer to that. I Velcroed my computer to that. So it became super comfortable. Like, I eliminated, this is my ritual. It's not really a ritual. I eliminate anything that is not prompting me to write.
Give me an example.
The wrong lighting, the too heat my legs. I don't like the computer like that. I like sitting in bed, but not on I would do my writing in bed and my editing on the couch because it felt comfortable and the position was comfortable. And so I would eliminate, I drink hot water. It's the first thing I do in the morning. So I would go downstairs. I live in a loft, so I sleep upstairs, and I would come down and make myself my hot water, make myself a lemon. And maybe a little bit of a ritual was going back up the stairs, just kind of say something to myself like, enjoy your writing, have a good time. Like I would say to a friend who's going on a trip,
Yeah.
A little bit of that.
That's great. Did you write, or do you like to write with music or without music? So
completely no music if I'm alone at the house and there's no noise. If there's any kind of noise, I put music, and I have a list. I have a playlist that's a combination of Bach and Mozart that is really, it's dynamic enough that I don't want to, nose down, nor dynamic so much that I can't focus because it's like, the Beethoven symphonies, and I'm like totally hyped. When I wrote my first book, interestingly, I was obsessed with Wilco. I don't know if you know the band Wilco.
Yep. Yep.
But I wrote my book to Hummingbird and Jesus, etc., and 3 songs on repeat. And I mean, I cannot hold my book without hearing the sound, immediately. I'm talking hours and hours and hours of it. So each book probably will have its own vibe from where I'm at. I guess the first one was more about Wilco, and this one is more about Mozart.
Right on.
Both very talented.
Yeah. Tell me where and how. You've already told us about your writing buddy or your editing buddy who came over at 11.
Yep.
Where and how, when, how, who did other people factor into this? Editor, you've talked a little bit about your agent here, anybody else in the process. And maybe this is also a place where you could talk about a book proposal and a publisher.
Yeah. So that's the part where you need a little bit of magic. And my life is very well organized around that. And so one day I was doing a speech, and in the speech, I said something like, with all the work I've done and all the contributions I've made, whatever, I still sometimes wonder if I'm contributing enough to other people's lives. It's kind of a thing for me to wonder that. And there was this woman in the front row. She was noticeably overweight, and I was talking a lot about that. And she followed me after the thing, and she grabbed me, and she was like, I forbid you to speak like that, because even if it's just me, you changed my life tonight. And some of the things you said, I don't know. I didn't know them. I've been suicidal. You've given me hope. She did this incredibly moving thing. And I will tell you, in the book, there will be a sentence for her. I don't know her name. I don't know anything about her. But I will say enough that she can recognize herself. And if she can ever come see me at a book signing, that would be an incredible blessing, because she changed my life. I got in my car, and I basically had a talk with myself around the lines of enough of, am I enough? Is there something? It's like, my experience is my experience. It's not more, it's not less. It's helped this one young woman. I don't care if it's all it does. enough of this like ego trippy of like, can I, should I, do I have enough to say, blah, 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 like enough with that conversation. And I did stop that conversation that day. And the next day I called 7 of my friends, eight of my friends, and I said, I'm ready to have an agent. Do you have anyone in your world that can be that or has that kind of capability? And, you know, some of them were Gay Hendricks, you know, people that are already published authors that could maybe direct me to their agents and things like that. So I have a network of people. We all do. So reach out to that. And I said, I'm ready for an agent. And I got 4 returns of my sister this, my friend that. And one person said, do you realize that there are people from William Morris, which is where my agent is, that sweat at Shape House and they love you. They love Shape House. They love what you did. Do you know about that? And I was like, no. And I met them the next day and we fell in love, really fell in love with each other. They've become dear, dear friends. And that's why I mean by a little magic, you know? Yeah. And then I started writing, and then I started writing some more, and then I wrote some more. I mean, writing is really about writing. People are like, I'm writing a book. I'm like, when is the last time you typed something? And they're like, what, 2 years? I'm like, well, you're not writing a book, you know? Yeah. So the proposal, so my agent is at WME, which is a really solid agency, obviously. And she's walked me through every step of the way. So the first thing I did is send her something. She was like, just send me anything, whatever you have, send me something. And then I sent her 2 stories that I had written that were from the book and very much had the mindset of the book. And she called me and she said, it's stunning. Like, your writing is really stunning and I love it. And let's start the process. And then I said, what, you my agent? And she was like, hell yeah. Wow. And then she guided me through the entire thing. And we are, you know, we're very advanced in the process. It's very exciting.
I'm really happy for you. That is a magical story.
Thank you.
That's great. Okay, so just a few more questions. How aware were you during the drafting of your reader? What was that like?
It's really a good question too. I kind of want to say not a lot while the writing was happening, and a lot when the editing was happening. Mm. So I attempt to have very, very little critical entries in my brain when I write. I just write. Like someone would play a guitar and start composing. You don't sit there going like, oh, I wonder if my aunt who lives next door is going to like this piece. You know, you write. You're just playing. You're just in it. There's no noise about it. You're just putting it out. Then it's the opposite job, as you know. Editing is all critic. The grammar, the sentence, the clarity, the meaning, the meaningfulness, all of it, you know, just like it's like a war zone for me at that point. You know, it's just like, who's going to like this? Is this redundant? Is this relevant? Is that something that can be of service to someone? I really love that your interview was started from that place, because my life is very much about that. And sometimes it's hard because you have a poetic sentence and you like the way it sounds. I say, but it's not advancing anything. It's just making you happy because you put the words together and it sounds good, you know. But that's grief you have to have, you know. You have to have a relationship with loss. Like one of my favorite stories in the book, my agent asked me to remove it from the book. And I was like, you just asked me to kill one of my children. Like, and it's not like the story is not good. She loves the story. She just like, it does not fit in the coherence of the book. And every time she's read the book, which she's read a few times now, and she's like, it's like the sound of like a screeching halt because it's something else. And she's right. She's right. But it was hard. It was hard because it's a very central part of my life. And it was really hard to let go. And then, you know, I can write it as something else, a blog or something else. Is that answering your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And that reminds me, who was it? Kill Your Darlings? Right? Yeah.
It's
part of the creative process.
Yes.
What's the best money you've ever spent as a writer?
That retreat. Going on retreat on I mean, whatever form that takes, but having a coach, having someone who could. Part of my suffering when I was starting was to not know what was good and what was not good. Mm. You know, not have a mirror that reflects. It's like you'd be singing for a group of people that don't hear. And it's like you can't tell if you just cannot tell if what you're saying is landing remotely. And so spending money to get someone who I respected, you know, find someone you respect. Like, don't do something like that with someone that you would not trust what they say. Like, I picked someone that had done retreats with friends of mine that had written books before that I really liked the depth, and I could see the thread of the kind of work this woman did. So I did that, and that was the best money I've ever spent.
Wow. What just, is it someone that you'd feel comfortable telling us their name? Maybe others would benefit from.
Yes, of course. Her name is Linda Silverstein, and she does a retreat in Carmel. It's called Carmel on the Beach, I want to say. And it's a 5-day thing, or 4 days sometimes. I mean, she changes it, and she's incredible. Yeah.
Sounds pretty cool.
There's someone else. If you're local to LA, you have to be local in LA. There's a guy, his name is Jack Grapes. And I think he teaches stuff online as well. He developed a whole method that's called method writing, kind of take on method acting, which has to do with like raw as hell, like go to your gut, right from there. And it's a 7-week, I want to say, and you go every Tuesday night, I want to say. I mean, all that is, don't quote me. Yeah. But something like that. You go every week for a number of weeks and you present your work. You read to a group and it gives you a different exercise, and then you read to the group and you read the faces, not just your reading. You read what's happening. They're laughing. They're not. They're poignant. They come at the end and say, oh my God, that sentence changed my life,
Wow.
So you build your skill that way.
Yeah. That sounds great. How do you think about promotion of the book? And some of this ties in, there's maybe a question that precedes this, is when you began the project, how did you think of success? Like, how did you define success for the project?
The reason why that woman was so relevant for me is that I reduced the scale by 70 million, or whoever many would be a huge success. I was like, I don't care. It's like, if all this work helps this woman make a choice to have a happier life and not decide to off herself in this particular example, not that she really gave me that complete, but somehow what I said really, really moved her. And so that reduced the pressure by a lot. It was just all of a sudden, it was just like, if 3 people, including my cousin, gets a little bit of value from reading this, then I guess I don't really care, to be honest with you. I don't really care. I mean, at some point, of course, when you do something, you want people to receive it, but that cannot be your engine. That just cannot be, as long as you have the engine of service, don't get me wrong. Yeah. I'm definitely about contributing something. I've worked hard on getting this inner life to be healthy. And a lot of people can benefit from some of what I've learned. And so to me, it's become a simple, I just want to contribute. I just want to put it out and say, hey, this is what could work for you. So promoting for me is the extension of the quality. So if what I did, Shape House was the same way. People were like, well, what's your marketing? And I was like, people come and they tell everybody they know. It's not, I don't do anything other than I deliver incredible service and impeccable, experience to people. But people would literally come, especially at first, my God, we would have someone come and they'd be like, the next Christmas gift to everybody they knew, was a session at Shape House.
That's how you're onto something, when you're creating evangelists.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
Okay, so my final question for you is, anybody who's listened all the way through to this point.
I can't imagine who that is. It's not me, gee. Okay.
People obviously who are resonating with you, and people who are interested in the creative process and taking what they know and their experience and sharing it with others in a way that makes a difference. What advice or encouragement do you give to that person?
To anywhere in their life? Just anything?
Yeah, let's say two parts. One, if it's about writing. So actually taking their ideas, making them clear, putting them between, 2 covers, sending them out into the world in a way that makes a difference. So that's one. And then just maybe the broader one that's just in general in life.
Well, the first one is super clear to me. The first one is nobody can say what you will say, just you. So it's a responsibility. For me, it became like a painter teacher offered that to me because I don't know how to draw, but I'm a great artist. And she broke that ceiling for me of, but I don't know how to draw a face, that doesn't look like a face. And she was like, I don't give a shit. It's like what you have to say, only you can say it. If someone wants to see your face, they can take a picture. Like, this is not about that. Like, your interpretation of the world through your eyes, and whether it's a collage or a painting, any of that. And that really transferred very well for me in the writing process. Like my story, nobody has that story. Maybe 3 people will be interested, but that is not for me to decide. So if you have a story and if you have something that you feel has a contribution to somebody else, whether it's one person or 70 million, do it. Like, don't do it. And then you'll know, because you'll show it to someone and they'll say, oh my God, like that's what happened to me. I showed it to people and people said, oh my God, it's beautiful. Let's do something with it. If they had said, it's shit, I would have been like, okay, I'll do something else. But don't sabotage, because maybe what you have to say, someone is going to explode their beautiful life because of you. So don't be stupid and don't be ego trippy and think that it has to be successful, or what's the point? We don't know. Yeah. We never know. And then for the world in general, whatever your spiritual groundings are, spend time there. Meditate, walk on the beach. I don't care what you do. Go to your church. Doesn't matter. But spend some time, have a date with your spiritual life would be my advice, because that's where everything is, so go get it there. Yeah,
I love that. Okay, well, Sophie, I've been so inspired by our conversation. Thank you so much. I was
inspired by your questions. My God, you were fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you. No, this was fun. I learned so much, and I feel like this is exactly what I can use, because I'm in the middle of my own project.
There.
In some ways feel like...
Call me offline. I can coach you a little more.
That'd be great. Despite living in an age where we have more comforts and conveniences than ever before, life isn't working for many people. Whether it's in the developed world, where we're dealing with depression, anxiety, addiction, divorce, jobs we hate, relationships that don't work, or people in the developing world who don't have access to clean water or sanitation or healthcare or education, or who live in conflict zones. There's a lot of people on the planet that life isn't working very well for. If you're one of those people, I invite you to connect with me at goodliving.com. I've created Life's Best Practices Breakthrough Coaching to help you navigate the transitions that we all go through. Whether you've just graduated school, you're going through a divorce, you just got married, you're headed into retirement, you're starting a business, you just lost your job, whatever it is you're facing, I've developed a 36-week course that you go through with me and a community of achievers and seekers who are committed to improving their own lives and the lives of others. So through this online program, you will have the opportunity to go deep into every area of your life, explore life's big questions, create answers for yourself in community, get clarity and accountability. If that's something you're interested to learn about, I invite you to contact me directly at brian@brianmiller.com or by visiting goodliving.com.